Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. As always, my name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me here is Wendy Hamilton, the CEO of TechSmith. We'll find out what TechSmith does later, but first, Wendy, I wanted you to tell me about the new research that was just released by TechSmith about your experiment with no meetings and how that worked out for you. So tell me a little bit about the context, what made you decide to do it, what you actually did, and what were the outcomes.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Gleb, for having us. Yes, we've been listening closely to our employees, and we heard a lot of frustration with meetings. It's probably ubiquitous frustration that has happened for many years. Specifically, all participants of meetings didn't feel like they needed to be there, and sometimes the meetings were just at inconvenient times where people thought there were other high priority work to do or interrupted them from high concentration tasks. So we set out with that ambitious goal to go without synchronous meetings for a month. And really pushed and adopted an asynchronous culture that relied heavily on technology for asynchronous communication, like messaging platforms as well as screen capture software. And what it enabled folks to do is to share information at a time that worked for them and have other people consume the information and comment on the information at the time that worked for them. What we found is that 85% of employees felt that they could replace meetings with asynchronous communication. And we saw a 15% productivity improvement measured by the number of employees who felt highly productive had improved.
Excellent. Now, tell me a little bit about the kind of challenges that managers faced with the lack of meetings. I can imagine, consulted for many, many companies on managing hybrid work, remote work, in-office work, and managers are usually the ones who want meetings more than the employees. So what has been the experience of managers and how have they navigated these challenges?
Sure. Well, what is important to clarify is nobody does these experiments expecting never to have a meeting again or no meetings are valuable. Really, the most important part is to be more deliberate and intentional for both management and employees about why they're having meetings and what they seek to gain from them. And we also put a lot of emphasis on discussion of what the exceptions should be, and we wanted to learn from that. Certainly we learned, and managers will tell you, if there's anything that needs to be discussed that's emotional or intense, don't try to do that asynchronously. Have a synchronous meeting, even better, a live in-person meeting. If there's anything where you're really trying to rally a high energy brainstorm and really a riff and get that going, that's also a situation where our managers really feel they can do better work with synchronous meetings, especially in-person meetings.
Now, for other organizations that are thinking of, oh, maybe I want to try this out, how did you prepare for this month of experiment?
Sure. Well, our definition of experimentation is you have a hypothesis that you're testing. You gather data before that hypothesis and after that hypothesis. And also you should embrace failure. There's no such thing as failure. You want to put people in the mindset that it's about learning and continuous improvement. We're a high experimental culture. It's been a big part of our culture. But for organizations who aren't, there needs to be a lot of socialization about what you're really trying to achieve and what good looks like for a particular experiment. The good is always learning.
Definitely. That's a very important part of experiments. Now, what has TechSmith learned? How will TechSmith be different after this experiment?
I would say that I would have told you, maybe my own ego bias is we didn't have a lot of unnecessary meetings. We're not a huge top-down management culture. It wasn't something management had to change. However, like I said, 85% of employees felt they could reduce the number of meetings. So we learned something, and what we've really learned is giving employees more tools to make good decisions about having meetings, and also give them ways to communicate, to inspire, to gather feedback, to inform without the need for a meeting. It's very easy for people to simply record a PowerPoint, even with their webcam and their face and their emotion with that voiceover, and share that and allow people time to really consume that information. Maybe some people consume it at twice the speed. Some people listen to it over and over again, before they comment on it, and then gather all that feedback in one place. What you need to do is enable people to try things different ways. That's how we think about this, as opposed to a top-down management change. We're enabling staff to see what works for them, and we think it works better.
Now, when I think about this experiment, reducing meetings, it seems that this will facilitate more distributed teams and more teams working remotely, maybe in a hybrid mentality. What's your perspective on that?
Well, part of why we did this is we are a hybrid shop. We have a Flex 20 work benefit. So right now, as part of continuing experimentation, we ask employees to come into the office just about 20% of the time. That's about our standard work practice. And this is after going remote suddenly in 2020, which we weren't prepared for, but we survived and certainly made some mistakes along the way. We've only been hybrid since building our new office and moving in October of last year, so not very long. So what we're doing is we're both leveraging the in-office time deliberately and figuring out how to use that intentionally, while we're also still improving our skills to work remotely and work hybrid. And it takes a long time. You need to make a conscious effort at it.
It definitely does. Like I said, I helped 21 companies by now transition, figuring out their long-term hybrid work arrangements. And about 1 day a week in the office is what I find most companies that I help adopt, because that's enough for team collaboration, cohesion, those more intense conversations. That's the best thing to do in the office. Whereas at home, the best it's having video conferences. You don't need to have a commute to come to the office to do video conferences. You're having synchronous meetings, and you can do a lot of things asynchronously. Email, the screen capture, and so on. And of course, just your own individual focused work. So the large majority of the time that workers are working is spent at home in order to maximize productivity and engagement and retention. So how did you come to the Flex 20 yourself? I'm curious.
Well, we started by listening to the employees and what arrangement they thought would make sense. 1 day a week, 2 days a week is the most common response when we ask, what do you think your team needs? What do you think the company needs as a whole? That doesn't mean everyone agrees with it. You're never going to get 100% agreement on any work policy, I think. But my idea was to listen to employees, meet them where they are, and then monitor outcomes and develop a fact base for how that's working. And everything's an experiment, including our Flex 20 policy and a few other things that we're doing. And we'll learn from it, and we'll grow, and we'll iterate as we need to.
Tell me a little bit more about your perspective on hybrid work and remote work more broadly. You've seen a number of companies right now trying to force employees back to the office, and you're clearly not doing that. You're kind of taking the opposite approach. You're listening to employees, as opposed to, let's say, Bob Iger coming into Disney and saying, very from a top-down perspective, ignoring what employees want and saying, I want everyone back in the office for 4 days a week. Or Elon Musk doing the same sort of things, leading from what they intuitively feel is the right thing, rather than starting with the employees, which I always do when I consult. We do a survey and some focus groups to see what employees want. And you're taking that approach. So what do you think is the difference between your approach? Why are you taking this approach of listening to employees versus others who are taking more of an authoritarian approach?
Oh gosh, I really hate to try and comment on any particular CEO.
I'm asking you to comment on the approach difference. You're more listening to employees. Others clearly are not. I mean, it's just the approach.
Yeah. I would say I feel that the way flexible work is often discussed in the press. It's either the proletariat rising above their domineering, boomer, out of touch boss, only to, I don't know, quiet, quick, and overwork, right? Overemployed, I guess is the term. Or the CEO is weaponizing return to office, maybe for some sort of loyalty test or some sort of crafty payroll cost saving exercise. I'm not sure. What I will say, it's complicated. In both cases, in all cases, including ours, even though we've always been employee first company, and I think many companies that are employee first, 100% retention still isn't the goal, right?
Sure.
If you have, you can't avoid employee conflict for the benefit of one set of employees at the cost of another set of employees or your customers or your long-term sustainability. So my guess is maybe the difference is who they're trying to ingratiate themselves with, politics, and maybe the differences are trying to accelerate figuring out who's really motivated to be there at those companies.
Now, when we think about hybrid work, remote work, one of the challenges that my clients are finding is how do they build an effective culture as they're transitioning to permanent hybrid work arrangements, with most people coming in an average of 1 day a week, 2 days a week. What have you done to build effective culture as you're transitioning from that remote modality to this Flex 20 hybrid modality?
Sure. I think that's a great question. I think a lot about, and we think a lot about, what type of culture creates long-term sustainable performance, not just short-term, productivity statistics, but really what will make teams successful long-term. We have our theories about that, our hypotheses about that, and we monitor those questions and that data very closely. We saw, for instance, when we looked at different cohorts of employees, that unfortunately the employees that were hired full remote at the beginning of the COVID had some indicators that were concerns for us. Their relationships outside of their immediate team were not as strong. They indicated they didn't necessarily have mentors or relationships with senior manager, or relationships outside their department, or best friends at work, or didn't have fun at work. Those are all, warning signs for us. So what we're really doing is, some of this can be addressed remote, and we're learning about how to do that. So the first 5 minutes of Zoom meeting, we try to make social time, and fun time as an instance. We're doing a virtual escape room this month, so we're trying to look for alternative social practices that can be done virtually. But we're also really trying to consciously leverage that little bit of in-office time, where perhaps it's a little bit easier to create energy or create fun, or to, even now, I feel a little bit like a psychopath, Dr. Gleb, because I can't look you in the eye, right? It's sort of hard. We're figuring out how to do that. It's sort of hard to feel like you're making that connection. Is really leverage that time. Don't have people come in the office to have their earphones on all day. Like create, we do free lunches and things like that to create those social opportunities. So we're trying to be intentional about building up those places that we think are a little weak in our culture.
Excellent. And do you do any remote social activities? I'll give you an example of something I do with my clients, a couple of examples. One is a virtual water cooler. So any team of, let's say, 6 to 8 people, that rank and file team, that's the usual span of control. In there, if they use Microsoft Teams or Slack, they create a channel for personal conversations. And every day they start the day by each person checking in at the start of their day as kind of the check-in, daily check-in on how they're feeling right now, what's been going on in their personal life recently, what they're planning to focus on at work that day, then an interesting fact about themselves or the world that other people on their team may not know. And then they respond to 3 other people. And throughout the rest of the day, they can chat in that personal channel, but that's their morning check-in. So that we find really helps teams communicate and collaborate and become more human to each other. So humanizing each other to each other. So that's very helpful. So that morning check-in. And then another thing we do is virtual co-working, where each day that for a hybrid team, let's say each day they're not coming to the office, or if there's some fully remote folks, each day they dial into a video conference call for about an hour to work on their individual tasks with members of their 6 to 8 people team. And so they start by sharing what they plan to work on. Then they turn off their microphones, they leave their speakers on, and video is optional. And then they work on their tasks. And as they come to a question, they have an idea, they have a problem they want to solve, they share that turn on their microphone and share that, and then they chat with their team members. Maybe they do a screen share or something like that to address it. And then they stop chatting and they go on to do their work. And at the end, everyone shares what they worked on during this period. So we find this is very motivating for people. They save their most annoying work for this period. It helps teams bond and helps people get into the organizational culture. It's especially helpful for those junior team members to build those ties and address those weakened bonds with each other, as well as to get on the job training. So immediate answering to questions. Do you do anything like that? Do you think those might be helpful for you?
I think those are fantastic ideas. We definitely have pods. We're organized into small, stable teams. Our whole company that have adopted some of those practices on their own, and they've been popular and spread through. So it wasn't uncommon for us even pre-COVID. We had a few full remote employees that they would join their in-person team online a significant part of the day and be there for each other. But what I really love about what you said is particularly the mentoring aspect of that. That is one of our biggest concerns of being hybrid. We're seeing a lot of new college grads, Gen Z grads, we're an entry-level hire, promote from within, who want an in-office experience. And it's not a great in-office experience if no one else is in office but them, right? So we're trying to figure that out. And part of that is social and relationships and those matters, but part of it is real mentoring, real learning. And how do you do that quickly as possible, make sure people aren't stuck? So I really like that. We don't quite have the formal messaging check-in. We're a Slack shop, but we do have OT channels, what we call off-topic channels, and anybody is encouraged to create kind of an affiliate or interest channel. I'm in the electronic vehicles channel and the dogs channel. There's a cats channel. I'm not in that. So it's really, if there's a travel channel, so people can share some of their personal experience and make jokes, and they can do that all day long if they need a little stress break.
Nice. I will be in the cats channel. Now, what kind of technology do you think is going to be really important to facilitate hybrid work going forward?
Oh gosh, you're asking a vendor that makes technology for a hybrid work. I will say, before I talk about the role of video, which we love, probably the biggest thing I found interesting in our evolution was a trend towards our internal messaging platform, a corporate messaging platform. Pre-COVID, we had complaints from employees of communication overload and platform overload. And a big reason for that is managers and certainly senior leaders mostly used email. And engineers, which is the bulk of the company, mostly used instant messaging. So you had, for the engineers, you had 2 platforms to check. They both could be urgent, and it felt a little overwhelming. And we had to do a pretty big overhaul of our communication practices. And I'll say now, I only use email for external. Yeah, it was a big cultural change for me. We're all, we're all the instant messaging, and there are a lot of reasons that is helpful. And I don't know, maybe the pendulum will swing and we don't like it anymore in 5 years. You know how these things are, but that's very important. The part that you still need to do is a little bit more the long form content sharing. And again, my talking over a PowerPoint and you watching it when you feel like it at the pace you want is far more helpful than me calling you into a meeting and making you sit there while CEO drones and drones on about her PowerPoint, right? So that's where the screen capture software and video editing software and that everyday kind of visual communication is very important for us. And obviously we love our own tools, but we all weren't actually using our own tools. Now we have our CFO, for instance, who's discovered it actually is better to do a screen capture to explain a cash flow spreadsheet. Whereas before, I'd always think you needed this meeting, to kind of walk through and point things out. It's actually not better for me because I never could follow what he was saying. I had to interrupt him 10 times anyway. This way I can, watch at my own pace and double check a few other things and things like that. So there has been a certain transformation that feels more empowering and improves clarity that is related to that technology adoption.
And can you, as we come to the end of our conversation, can you share how TechSmith has been helping its clients facilitate hybrid work?
Oh, absolutely. We love doing that. We live for our clients. We sell to every industry. Can't name an industry that we're not in, and it was so heartbreaking for us to watch what happened. Over COVID. We especially serve higher education and corporate trainers. And people training what we call software adoption or customer education, people training and supporting their software products. And they all were just crestfallen and stressed about how they can serve their customers. And it was very heartening for us to help them during that transition, help support, communicate with development to escalate a bug, or QA to communicate to leadership to change their priorities based on something they were seeing. That all became, these short software screencasts to really communicate the point. Flipped education, flipped learning. I could go on forever. I love this stuff, but we help people get knowledge into video. Ultimately, that's what we do, and we're very proud of that.
Excellent. Any last words as we wrap up this conversation?
No, I just wanted to thank you. I really appreciate your contributions and ideas, and I will bring them back to TechSmith.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your expertise with our listeners and viewers. And thank the listeners and viewers for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked us out and leave a review. It's very helpful for us to know what to do better and for other folks to discover the show. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.